I experienced Billionaire brain training and it changed my life. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Andrew Miles. I've dedicated my life to Chinese martial arts and medicine. Medicine after an unfortunate incident where I had 2 delicious gas station hot dogs and it was Chinese medicine that fixed me within hours. In order to do better at everything I've put my mind and intent to, I got an opportunity to try out Billionaire brain training. And I mean, this is used by people who are knighted, people who run multi-billion-dollar companies. You use something today that was bought or sold by the people who use this particular system. And the brains behind this system is actually an acupuncturist neuroscientist who's been on this podcast, Dr. Drew Pearson. And he invited me to come to Seattle to try this out for myself. I was definitely skeptical at first and didn't really know what to expect, but the effect it's had on my life has been nothing short of extraordinary. My brain now functions in a different way than it used to. When I got done with the brain training, I found that I'm able to now run different thought patterns as though they're different programs. So if you have a bunch of windows open on your computer screen or different programs running in your computer, you can get the idea that there are different aspects of the brain that can be involved with different activities. Before, only one of those would be in my consciousness. I could pay attention to one and the others would kind of maybe be running subconsciously. Now they can run at the same time and I can access them just as you might having different windows open on your computer screen. If you've ever done office work and have had 2 monitors as opposed to 1, you can understand how it can increase efficiency. My brain is now able to do that as well. I'm kind of using one brainwave frequency, almost like a radio frequency, to do one set of work and using another to do a different set of work, and I can transfer back and forth between them. One of the stranger aspects that's come as a result of this brain training is that before I would think and generate ideas, and now they seem to come out of the sky into my brain, and I have to type as fast as I can or write down. It's like I'm hearing it rather than generating the ideas. It seems to really be coming out of the sky into my brain, and I'm just trying to keep up. When I went through the Biology of Tongue Diagnosis series, that wasn't me thinking, well, I've got this good idea. It was me waking up in the morning, and in the space between sleep and awake, that theta state, that twilight state, ideas would start flooding in. And I was getting my computer open to write it down as fast as I could. And then later spent the day methodically looking up the information that was coming in. So that's new. That is described as I wouldn't say like genius as a person is a genius, but that is a kind of, traditionally ancient Ireland, they called it the fire in the head. It's a translation from Gaelic. And there's an idea in the word genius, if you look at the root of it, there's a concept of fire associated with that. So the ability to kind of take ideas that were honestly beyond my pay grade, things I couldn't have thought of before, were just coming into my head and I was just writing them down. It was not just unlocking the subconscious, it was opening up something else. After doing meditation, I could be reading maybe something on the Scythians, just for fun reading. And I had a friend who would have a dream that I was screaming at her about the Scythians. What the hell, right? So possibly telepathic abilities, and I say possible, but realistically this happened 20 times in a row. Every time I did a particular set of brain training that Dr. Drew had me on, this happened afterwards every single time. So yes, it's been amazing. It's been life-changing in many positive ways. But before I get into that, I think it's fair to say that there is a downside to this. One is that all of that yang, all of that fire, it requires deep reservoirs of yin. It's energizing in some aspects, but it can be exhausting in others. And so it's important to have a deep physical practice. You need to physically be able to keep up with it. While it is amazing, it's important to have a physical practice and stay really well nourished. And that's something that Dr. Drew had mentioned to me. Make sure you're taking all of these nootropics, herbal and modern scientific blends. And that was a part that I hadn't kept up on as well as I should have. So it definitely had more of a draining effect. That said, you have times in your life where things, you seem to get into flow of synchronicity. And this was that, but not in a passive way. It was just everything unfolding to create a life most closely linked to my fate. And I say that not only as a passenger, but both active and passive fate. And when I say active fate, I'm not even talking about self-determination. There's something in between. I don't have a word for it, but it's something that the training, the deep meditation has opened up. Now, on the subject of brain training, I was able to put together through the brain training while I was doing Qigong what different brainwave frequencies were doing and how that overlaps with different aspects of Qigong and with Chinese medicine as a whole. So I'll go through the 5 brainwave states right now and how they correlate to the Chinese 5 phases. With Delta, you have water. Theta is the dreamlike state. It's like a waking dreamlike state. It's kind of, if you're daydreaming or spacing out a little bit, you're driving on the road and you seem to be using your imagination. You're just kind of on autopilot. That's wood. The next level up in terms of frequency would relate to Earth, and those are alpha waves. When people are about to shoot an arrow or a gun, they're in a relaxed state of concentration. This is the goal of most meditation, is to get you into an alpha brainwave state. Above this, we have beta, which relates to metal. This is where most of our life, especially within our current culture where we are, that's logical thought, and that's very discerning, and that relates to metal. And then highest up is gamma, which is what Tibetan monks seem to be in when they're meditating. That's what babies will get into it when they're learning languages and doing that at a very rapid rate. As I was doing meditation, small circle meditation, what I discovered for myself was that if I wanted to get my brain waves into a conscious delta, into these very low, infralow frequencies, it involved getting my kidneys and legs to pulse, which is something I can do voluntarily thanks to Qigong, and the brainwave training that I've done has also greatly accelerated my ability to control this within myself. If I wanted to get into gamma brainwave states, I found that bringing my blood circulation up to where I felt pulsing at the vertex of the head and through the heart especially, that allowed my brain to be nourished perhaps, but that was associated or correlated with getting my brainwave frequencies into gamma for not just spikes, but relatively consistent spikes. So yeah, all of that was very fun. Now, how did we get there? Now, there has been biofeedback for a long time, and this is not just biofeedback. There's the spider cap that you wear, and basically force your brain to sort of figure out patterns. And that's tiring, but it's like a workout for your brain. In addition to that, there's work that's done around the biofeedback. Biofeedback is just that. It's a marker. It's like a metric. There's also heart rate variability that we did and that we looked at. And then looking at the brain charts, figuring out where the weaknesses were and working specifically on those weak areas where, like in my case, I had been doing combat sports. I've had some hits in the head. They did their damage. And we were able to work through those areas and then look 6 months and a year later and see those areas of the brain which had been damaged had healed. So that was absolutely wonderful. There's a lot of the work around this too that had to deal with forgiveness, gratitude, and compassion. And yes, that sounds mushy and, perhaps woo-woo, but these are core aspects of every religious tradition since forever. And they're very, very useful. And when we really start to free ourselves of those attachments, we can create an area, a path, a cushion for ourselves where we're absolutely free to go in the direction that we want to. The impetus for that direction may have been fear or trauma. And then there's a space at which you say, okay, am I continuing on this path out of fear or trauma? Am I continuing out of this from a sense of active or passive fate? Is this just love driving me forward? And that is something that you're able to really, really feel. And, during this work, I was in kind of an isolated pod. I literally like this kind of womb-like pod that I was in, sat there in a recliner inside this pod with my brain strapped up, or my skull strapped up with different electrodes to it. And there's a lot of deep work that you can do there. But if you're just listening to this, what I would suggest is you can get quite a lot of good out of just figuring out in your life where there are barriers, where there are negative emotions. And a good way to do that is actually just to challenge yourself to do more in life. If you challenge yourself to give more, to love more, you're going to hit into barriers where you're like, God damn it. Last time I tried this so-and-so did this. And, it's important then to take the opportunity to really feel that emotion and in a physical sense, not a logical sense like, oh yeah, I forgive him, but really feel in the body the anger that you have, the resentment, whatever it is, and go through an active forgiveness to where you feel a notable change within the body itself. That's where the work is. It's not easy to do, but if you do that, then what tends to replace that is a sense of gratitude once that bitterness is gone. And then this is important because you might think, well, I had this bad experience. I, walked down an alley and got mugged and now I'm afraid of alleys, right? When you do this work, it's not that you just go through alleys at night because, experience and trauma teaches you things that are important. It's the emotional control that has over your body physically that you get to decouple. And you still get the experience to say, you know what, that's still a dumb idea, but that the idea of that no longer controls me. If I want to, I can go down that alley perfectly at peace. And that's a benefit of this type of training. Now, what Drew has done is he's taken Zen, he's taken Taoist traditions and has applied those as the kind of operating system and uses the technology as sort of the software in order to engage with people, right? So it's not to say that, oh, this is all, new and cutting edge. Well, it is, but it isn't. This is just by getting this active feedback, you're able to adjust yourself at a much faster pace. Whereas before you may meditate and you live with a master and then he sees your behavior and smacks you around or, gives you a hit with a stick, or there's corrective behavior that will happen over a much longer time frame. So if you're interested in doing something like this, and I would say that while this kind of work is not cheap to get into, it will pay itself back over many times if like me, you are already set on a direction with your heart in that direction that also was yielding action. That's what I would say. If it's yielding action, you're not just sitting at home dreaming of something, you're actually taking steps to it and finding some kind of blockage as a result of the steps you're physically taking, then it's well worth to do. And what I would say is that if you look at some of these centers that are celebrity endorsed and rather big, understand that the brains of it might not. If you want just the content without the gloss, if you don't need a lot of the external packaging, just contact Drew Pearson directly. You can do that at drdrewpearson.com. Thank you so much for listening to the Botanical Biohacking Podcast. If you like this one, refer it to a friend. Tell people about it. Why not? Have a beautiful day. I'm your host and favorite cousin, Dr. Andrew Miles.